Uncommon Analysis, everyone. I hope you're having a good day. Today, I want to talk a little bit about um, why Kamala lost, why the Democrats lost. There's been a lot of videos and a lot of discussion, obviously, since the absolute, complete, just evisceration that Donald Trump handed down to the Democrats on Tuesday. So there's a lot of leftist, progressive, liberal pundits, commentators now wringing their hands and trying to explain why she lost, right? And most of those discussions have been around tactical things. What could they have done differently? Could they have had a different candidate? Should they have had a primary? Should they have done this? Should Kamala have, toured with Cheney? Was their messaging bad? All these tactical things. And I may do an article. I may do a video about those in the future. But what I want to talk right now about are the indicators that should have told anyone, that the odds of Kamala winning this election were insanely low, and it probably would not have mattered, honestly. Anything they did tactically would have changed that. Okay? I don't think anything the Democrats could have done tactically would have changed the outcome of this election. And I'm going to go through why. The other thing I want to say is at the end of the day, at the end of the video, I'll talk about there probably was one Democrat that likely could have won this election, even with these indicators. There's only one I can think of, and there may be more. There's only one I can think of, and I can say with fair certainty that I believe if that person had been the Democratic candidate, they likely would have won the White House and probably won it comfortably. However, we'll go into that later. Let's stick to the point right now. So right now, let's talk about this. The biggest indicator, and this is true and has been true, and any honest pundit or analyst should have pointed this out repetitively, is this. This is from the Hill. This is the average of right track, wrong track polling over the last 2 years. Okay? Look at these numbers. 2 years now. 2 years now. For 2 years, going up to this election, on average, you're looking at around a quarter or less of the population has believed the country is on the right track. Right track's here on the blue on the bottom for those who aren't paying attention. Right? There were a few days here early last year that kind of got a little above 30, and a couple days kind of toward the end, she kind of squeaked above 30, kind of squeaked above 30. But for the most part, this has been a 20s number. Okay, even low 30s is a dismal number. You don't win re-election if 30% of the people believe the country's on the right track. It doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. It's never happened before, and it's not likely to happen. When your administration has failed so badly that less than, you're talking about 1 in 4, around 1 in 4 people believe the country's on the right track, you're not getting the job back, Biden. You're not getting a promotion, Kamala. Anybody tied or can in any way be perceived as tied to this disaster is not likely going to win the election, which is why I say all this tactical crap is nonsense. I don't think it would have made a difference. Anyone in active politics today at the national level was, as with a Democrat with a D beside their name, was highly unlikely to win this election just based on this data point alone. The odds of them winning were low, but particularly someone directly involved or directly active in politics today. Harris, Biden, not a chance in hell, not a snowball's chance in hell. An active senator, no. An active Democratic senator, not in the least. An active Democratic governor, possibly, but what one's going to run with this hanging around their neck? Let's be honest, folks. Let's be honest with ourselves. You are a Democratic politician. You believe you had a shot, though. You believe your career is putting you on a trajectory, and that you could win the White House, and you have a desire to run the White House. Are you going to? And you're likely only going to get one legitimate shot at it. Sometimes you get lucky, and people can go multiple times, and they fail a few and get there. But in general, you're going to get one shot, and you're going to get one shot in this particular case where you're going up against Trump. You're almost certainly going to get one shot because if you lose, you're damaged goods as far as the Democratic base is concerned, as far as the progressive base is concerned. You go up against Trump and lose, your career is over. Your ambitions for the White House are going to be over because you're never going to get past that. So you can think maybe every Democratic governor, they're removed from it. They weren't directly involved in voting for these policies, right, that have put the economy in crapper and have led the country down this chaotic path that we're on, open the borders and let all these idiots in, right? No, sorry, not idiots. Let all these illegals in, right? Who does that? Who does it? No one in active politics today in the Senate, the House, or at the national level with a D beside their name is going to have any chance, which leaves you with governors. They could maybe find a governor willing to run, but I'm telling you right now, I don't think Newsom, I don't think Shapiro, I don't think Whitmer, I don't think any of your A-tier candidates are going to touch that with a 10-foot pole because of this. Why would they want to be bogged down by this? Why would they have to have this crap around their ankles on what's likely going to be their only shot to run? They'll sit back and wait for another time. They're all relatively young. They're all in their 50s. They can wait. I don't see any of the A-tier governors at the Democrat side running, even if you had a primary. So you're going to end up with either somebody too close to the administration or some B tier never run folks. If you know, there is one person. So somebody, Democrat, the only person come in that I can think of do this is somebody who's going to have no connection to the current political climate. They have to be able to detach themselves from the mess that Biden has created. And there is somebody I believe, and like I said, I'll tell you at the end. All right. So anyway, look at this number. This is just not. This is it right here. Right check, wrong right. That's fundamentals. You're not escaping that. Kamala had no chance. Odds for winning with this are next to no. Or Biden. With this wrapped around them, next to no. The odds of any other Democrat tied to current political, like I just said, winning with this wrapped around their neck ankles, not likely. All right, that's fundamental. Second thing we're going to look at is polling. We're going to hopefully go through polling. We'll try to go quick because this video is going to probably get a little long. So let's look at the national polling. National polling. Now, this isn't necessarily cause, but should be an indicator. This is definitely an indicator that the honest reporters and honest pundits and honest analysts should have told you doesn't look good for Kamala. The odds of her winning are not there, right? Or insanely low. Right here. This is national polling. This is real clear politics. Real clear polling. This is while Biden was in the race, and this is when Harris came in. Now Harris came in, right? She got her little bump. Hey, we're looking good. We had our little joyous um, convention. She's nominated officially. Yay, looking good. Well, not really, because if you look at these numbers, that's her high water mark. You see that up top? You see where it says Harris 2+2.2? You see that? That's the high water mark she had in the national polling. That's as high as it ever got. That's as high as her lead ever got was 2.2. And by election day, it was down, right? And the final polling on the fourth had her 0.1. Well, this looks good. And even here, technically, she's ahead that day. But as everyone should know, and I'll give the press credit for this, they did generally make this known to people. But they still pushed the narrative that Kamala had a chance of winning this comfortably, or even some people believed with a large win, which was just nonsense. That 2.2, even its peak, was never large enough. Democrats traditionally, it is accepted knowledge they need to have a 3-point lead in the national polling to have any prayer at winning the electoral college. Why is that? Because Democrats run up the score in highly populated states. California, New York, right? They'll run up and win those states by millions and millions and millions of votes. Doesn't get any more electoral college votes, but they'll get millions more votes there. So yeah, on the national politic, they get more votes, but they don't win any more states. So they need to have at least a 3% margin is typically accepted to win that election, to have a shot at winning the national election. And let's leave out for now. Let's well, I'm going to mention it, but we'll leave it. Traditionally, over now 3 cycles, including this one that just happened, and but at least the previous two. So let's pretend this is look at. I won't do the 2020 hindsight. So let's go to the last 2 elections, 2020 and 2016. Traditionally, polling outfits, other than a handful, do not know how to poll Trump. They under poll Trump horrifically. They don't know how to do it. We'll leave that on the sideline for now, not talk about it, but just to understand you can't just pretend that suddenly this polling is accurate. It's going to be accurate this time when Trump's running, even though the last 2 cycles it was horrifically bad, particularly in 2020. In 2020, it was abysmal. It was abysmal. Most polling outfits were way not only off, they were off way. Not only were they off by their margin beyond their margin area, many of them were off by multiples. Some of them were off by more than twice their margin of error. That's how bad their misses were in 2020. So I don't want to beat that dead horse, but even if you take the polls at face value and believe this is right, Harris never was in the lead. Never was in the lead. So let's look at the individual state polling because that was just the overall national polling. So here's the overall state polling. Um, and I want to I want to look at one more thing. Sorry. I want to start out one more. I want to start out here. We're going to bump back a couple, right? And then we'll go through all these because I want to show you. This is the top battleground, right? This is the average, the top battleground. Now this is not every individual state. This is the synopsis. As of election day, this is where things were, right? Harris is ahead in 2 states. Sorry, this is a little out of the window here. If I can move it over. Harris is ahead in 2 states by half a point or 0.4 states. That's it. So, and these 2 states aren't going to get her there. These 2 states don't get her there, but let's show it. This is the map based on that polling. Harris 251, PA 19. I'm sorry. Harris 251, Trump 287. Trump's still in the lead. But let's go back there. All right, let's go back here. All right. So we're looking, top background. This is averages. So there was a brief period of time here in late August, early September, where Harris was leading this. And then she went down and she stayed behind. Now, these are averages. Obviously, not every state. This is an aggregate of all the states. But there was this little brief window right here, right, where Harris was in the lead. That was about as high as she ever got. Now, if we go and look at the individual states, let's look at Wisconsin, right? Wisconsin. Here we are on election day. They're ahead. She's been ahead. Not. No, she's behind. She's ahead, but like I said, barely ahead. Same thing. Let's look at the next one. Nevada. Trump's ahead. Trump's ahead by a good bit. You know, it's about 1 point going into election day, and he basically, Kamala came ahead, right? Oh yeah, we're looking good. September, by October though, boom, falling behind. Trump's got the momentum. Trump has the lead. It's close. It's close. We'll put it in the maybe category. We'll put Nevada in maybe because it's 0.6 on election day. On election day it was 0.6. We'll say Nevada's a maybe. Look at Wisconsin. All right, Trump was ahead by 0.4. We already went through that, but we'll look at the polling. Yeah, and she was ahead and fell apart, and Trump's right there. Kind of switched back and forth, but he's ahead. Okay, so we'll give her that one. Michigan, we already went through Michigan, right? On election day, she was up 0.5. She had a lead, lost it, and kind of came back here at a little bit at the end, 0.5. Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, 0.4 on election day, Trump. She had a little bump and then was behind pretty much the rest of the way. But like Nevada, Trump's lead is less than 0.5%, so we'll put this in a maybe category. North Carolina, this was never in play. This was never in play. This polling is bullshit. This polling was bullshit. This state was never in play. The average was 1.2 on election day, but honest to God, this state was never in play. Harris had, like, I think there might have been one day. Nope, not a single day. There wasn't a single day, even with that bullshit poll from Siena that came out, where she was ahead. This North Carolina was never in play. That was a pipe dream. That was an illusion. Even the Harris campaign pulled money out of North Carolina. They waited way too long to do it. Frankly, they should have pulled that money out and never wasted it on that state. That state was never in play. I see why they thought that was. I see the mirage where here they kind of thought they were in September, but it was obvious. They should have had better tactical people on their team. That money should have been spent elsewhere. But I don't want to go down that path right now. So North Carolina, no. Georgia, again, never in play. Never in play. She did have a slight lead here for a few days in early September, but the state was never in play. The state was never in play. These polls, New York Times again. I don't know why people listen to the New York Times. They've been so awfully bad in presidential years, especially when Trump's on the ballot. But anyway, 1.3, never in play. All right, so let's go back to our map. Let's look at our map. Now, we said these two, we said Nevada and PA we'll believe those as in play. These we'll follow the polling everywhere else. But and even though Harris's lead in these 2 states is smaller than Trump's lead in these 2 states, just to play counter argument to folks, I'm going to leave these as swing states, right? So if Harris pulls out Nevada but not Pennsylvania, she loses. Nevada's not enough. It's 6, right? The only path, even if she pulled up, the only path Harris had was to win all 3 of these states. That's all the path she had. And the odds were not in her favor. Like I said, even in these states that I played swing state with and was friendly to Harris's argument with to make it happen, Trump's lead in these states on election day was greater than Harris's lead in these 2 states. So the odds that she was going to pull off the trifecta of the upper Midwest was insanely low. Okay, but that was the only real path she had. Now, I will be honest with you, I will respect any analyst that, or even pundit, that said on election day, going into election, Harris has a slight chance. She could pull off an electoral college upset. She could maybe win the White House. It's not likely based on everything we've shown so far. And I've only gone through 2 of my points so far. But you could say it looks like she might pull it off. She has at least an arguable path that she could win. Not likely, but you could say there's a slim chance she might be able to win. That's fine. And anybody that was honest on election day and said Harris might be able to pull something off, she might squeak out an electoral college win, right? It's a low probability, but it could happen. Those people are honest. Those people looked at the same data that I've presented so far, and they were being honest with you. However, on election day, you had a lot of people believing Harris is going to not just squeak it out, she's going to win comfortably, or she's going to have a landslide. Those people, anybody that told you that was a liar or was just ignorant. Anyone that was advocating those two pieces of information was ignoring the fundamentals or was a liar. Okay? No way around that. Now, I know there's a lot of people that consume data and consume media. Those lies, they didn't bother to look at these fundamentals. They were being fed lies, so that's why they believe what they did. That's why they went into these election nights thinking Kamala's going to win comfortably. Kamala's going to win with a big, huge mandate. Never was up. Never. That those two were never on the table. Okay, and only through two of my fundamentals. Let's go into the third one. All right, we went through the polling. Third one, registration advantages. This is a huge one. This is massive. This is a true across all the swing states. Republicans have done a massive job, a massively good job of getting people registered Republican. The registration advantages are down by Democrats. In fact, Republicans extended their advantages in the swing states that they had the advantage, and Democrats' advantages have shrunk across the ones where they had advantage. And some of them they've actually swung. Pennsylvania is what I'm going to talk about because Pennsylvania is so dramatic, and I don't think people that aren't from the state understand how dramatic this shift is. Pennsylvania ended this election, going into this election, with only 290,000 more Democrats registered than Republicans. Now, I know 29,000 sounds like a lot, especially when we're talking about several elections where the margins have been incredibly tiny across a couple states. But you have to understand, this is a state that had well over 600,000, Democrats had well over 600,000 advantage not that long ago, and over a million advantage not that long ago at all. In fact, in 2022, when we had Oz, which was a terrible candidate, the worst candidate I've ever seen. Republicans should have been embarrassed to have that man on the ballot. He's the worst Republican I've ever seen try to win statewide office in Pennsylvania in my lifetime, and I have lived here for over 35 years. That was just atrocious, but I'm kind of digressing. Anyway, when that election happened, the breakdown of registered party registration was 39% Republican, 46% Democrat, and 15% Independent. Let me explain that to you. Let me explain what that means. That means for a Republican to win with those numbers, the Republican had to hold every single Republican vote, and then win the independent vote by better than 2/3 to win the election. That's insane, folks. Meanwhile, the Democrats, if they held their base, literally had to convince less than 1 in 3 people that were considered independent to vote for their candidate. And they had the election, which is why Democrats tended to win statewide races here, because that's all they had to do. You literally had to get like less than a third of the independents to vote for your guy, and you win. Now, this election, Republicans had a 40% of the vote, 40% registration. Democrats were 44% of the registration. Still a pretty good margin. And then independents were the remaining 16. Now, 40-44 doesn't sound, still gives the Democrats an advantage for sure, but 40-44 is a 4-point swing versus 39-46, which is a 7-point swing. And it means the Democrats still have an advantage, but nowhere near the advantage they had, right? Republicans have still got to win and win outside their party very well, but not to the absurdity they were before. And this is the same. This registration advantage is consistent across all the states. All the swing states have this kind of behavior. So anyone honestly looking at this should have known Kamala's in trouble. We barely won Pennsylvania last time. We barely won Georgia. We barely won Arizona. We barely won Wisconsin. We won these things by. I mean, the only state that. Let me look at the numbers. The only state I think that Biden won comfortably among the swing states last time, like by comfortably I mean like 2% or more, I think was Michigan. Let's see. Let me verify that for you. Um, yeah, so yeah, Michigan he won by like two and a half, a little over 2.5, right? That was a comfortable win. That was like, you know, a good win. Pennsylvania, 1.2%. right? 1.2%, less than 20,000 votes, less than 20,000 votes. I'm sorry, 120,000 votes. So it was 120,000 votes. Yeah, 2%, less than 2%. George, this is a big deal, guys. This is a big deal. This was a big deal. This should have told. You went from 600,000 advantage to less than 300,000 advantage, and you won the state by 120,000 ish. That's a problem. That's a problem. And this isn't, and Pennsylvania wasn't the only one by far. But that's the third crucial point. Fourth crucial point is the early voting returns. Again, I'm going to look at Pennsylvania as an example, but because I'm most familiar with it, but it's indicative. The the early vote breakdown across all the swing states, Republicans shrunk if they did not completely take over. And why that's important. On election day, Democrats usually run up in most states. They run up the early voting. And then on election day, on the in-person voting, Republicans have to kind of get enough votes in the box to win. That wasn't the case this year. Many states, Nevada being one of them, I think Nevada Republicans actually had more votes in the box. Now the Democrats didn't never had a huge advantage in Nevada, but they always had a slight advantage in Nevada on early voting. This year Republicans won. Arizona, same deal. The range, the range between how the spread, if you will, between Republicans and Democrats in early voting shrunk for the Democrats in every single one of these states. And any analyst worth their salt or reporter worth their salt that was talking to you, or even pundit who's trying to be honest, was talking to you about the election, should have known these numbers and should have been truthful about them. Here in Pennsylvania, early voting is not something Pennsylvania is really known for. We don't have true formal early voting. Don't want to digress too long here, but I'll give you real quick. We have what they call absentee voting, which is you can request an early ballot vote because you're not going to be in town, you're sick, you're not going to be around, whatever. So you can do a mail-in ballot. And up until 2020, to get an absentee ballot, you had to have a valid reason. You had to request it, and there had to be a reason for getting an absentee ballot. It wasn't just given to anybody. 2020, under the COVID lockdowns and stuff, they changed the laws. So now anybody can vote early. And they also started this, what they call in-person voting. But in-person early voting in Pennsylvania really isn't in-person voting like is in Georgia or other states. In-person early voting is leveraging this mail-in ballot. Basically, in-person early voting is you go down the county, you request a mail-in ballot, and you just fill it out and hand it to the guy on the spot. So, and there are a few satellite things they set up that are new too. But that's it's not quite the same thing as those states. But anyway, getting into Pennsylvania's early voting, 33% of 55 looks good for the Democrats. Until you realize last election, this was something, the Republican person, this was like 26 or 27, right? 6% might not seem like much, but it matters. It's another indication. And Pennsylvania was the only one. You can go across all these states. And you'll see that the margins, if the Republicans didn't flat out take the margins, the Democratic margins shrunk if you compare them to 2020. These are all indicators. Harris is in a bad way. That was our fourth one. No, our final one, the final indicator, had to be with goes into the crosstabs of the polling. Um, and they did talk about this. The news did talk about this, but they underplayed it. Like the news did talk about how Trump's doing better with black men, and Trump's doing better with blacks in general, and Trump's doing better in Hispanics and with this group and with that group. Um, Now Harris put out this false narrative. Her punditry and her surrogates put out this completely false narrative. And one of the groups, I don't know if it was directly tied to the Harris campaign or it was one of the action committees on the left, ran ads galore that were just total nonsense. And the ads were pretty much, I'm a two-time Trump voter, and it didn't matter. They'd have some paid actor, do this. And they were paid actors. The majority of them were paid actors. You can find their biographies if you look for them and their resumes trying to find work. The most notorious was, I think there's one with two people claiming to be farmers in Pennsylvania, and they were actors. Where I was a two-time Trump voter, and I'm now going to vote for Kamala Harris. Now, there is no doubt in my mind, some people that voted for Trump in the past are going to vote the opposite direction, just like some people vote for Biden, and we're going to switch over to Trump. However, this idea that this was going to be some major group, and you also had the TDS sufferer folks. What was that? Bill Kristol's part of them, and other, they all, oh my God, we're Republicans, but we're not going to vote for Trump. The Never Trump groups, kind of pushing this narrative too that somehow Trump voters, Republican Trump voters, were somehow going to abandon Trump. They were just going to abandon him in large numbers. This was garbage. This was garbage, and this kind of plays in the polling. I'm going to tie this all together. Believe me, I know I'm ranting a little bit, but I'm going to tell you. Every poll from the beginning of this cycle that asked a simple question: who did you vote for last time, and who do you plan to vote for this time? If the poll asked those two questions, the overwhelming response, Trump retained 95 to 97% of his base, of his previous voters. If you voted for Trump in 2020, you are almost certainly going to vote for him in 2024. The little small margins that were going out now, I don't know what the numbers were Kamala because I didn't really tear into it, but back when Biden was, I'll tell you what the Biden numbers were because I was watching closely back when Biden. When you ask those questions, Biden was still in the race. Biden was luckily, if he retained, he was consistently in 85%. That was it. So this idea that there was going to be this big peel away of Trump voters was nonsensical. But it was pushed by the industry. The other stuff was underplayed. They did mention it. They did mention, especially toward the end, oh crap, Trump is overperforming his previous numbers. And he was. Blacks, Latinos, women, everywhere. Remember, Kamala was supposed to be the woman candidate. She's running her entire campaign. That's how she's going to win. They were still pushing this nonsense. They were still pushing this nonsense toward the end. Now, I'm gonna smack that down in a minute. But um, those things, and they did report them in the news, but they didn't really tell you the truth about the impact. It was obvious in early voting. There was a big poll done. The problem with smaller groups when you take a big poll is there's usually not enough of them sampled to draw big conclusions. When you say, hey, blacks appear to be supporting Trump in much higher percentages than they did last time, but your polling only took 800 people into account, and maybe 50 of them were black. You can't really make a big indication. It will show in the numbers, right? It'll show in the numbers that it appears they're supporting Trump more than they were in the past, but that's not a big enough sample size to be able to draw legitimate conclusions from. However, there was a very large poll, all black voters, that was done back in October, or at least it was released in October. Pretty sure it was October. I might even go back to September, where it showed Trump or it showed that Harris was going to underperform Biden among black voters by about 7%. This is a very This whole poll was nothing but African American voters. It was a respectable poll. There was no reason to disbelieve this poll. And this poll showed the same pattern they were seeing in these other polls. And this pattern showed Trump, Biden is underperforming by 7% among black voters. And Democrats in their country were very dismissive. Some of them were they didn't mention it, but they were very dismissive. Now let me explain something to you that's important. A 7% shift may not seem like that much. Biden get 92% versus Harris getting 85% may not seem like a big deal. It's definitely a noticeable amount, but oh my God, we're still winning by 85%. Who cares? We're winning. That is a flippant and ignorant attitude by people who don't understand math. Okay? African Americans represent 13% of the population. A 7% shift among that group equates to about a 1% vote shift. Okay? A 1% vote shift in an election that has been decided by a few tens of thousands of votes in a handful of states. That's something that your sphincter should pucker at if you were a Democrat. That should scare you to the core. That's just one demographic. That's just one demographic. And they were flippant about it and they were dismissive of it, publicly anyway. And this same trend was showing across the board in all these different constituencies. Democrat constituencies were falling around. Trump was eating the money. He was stealing their base. No, he wasn't winning all of them, but he was taking big chunks. He did flat out win Hispanics. He flat out won, especially Hispanic win. He flat out won them this election. These were all data points that were available before this election. These were all indicative that Harris is not likely going to win this thing. She has, like I said, the polling gave you a path. We could make an argument of a small, slim electoral path. The rest of these things were all nails in the coffin that the odds of her winning were insanely low. And as you put them all together, if you put all those things we just went through, all five of those things together, if you went into election night expecting Harris to win, particularly if you expect Harris to win comfortably or by a large margin or any kind of blowout, you were a fool. Now, You may have been a fool. You may not have been a fool because you were fed information you didn't realize you were being fed garbage information, but you were lied to. The only way you could have gotten that is if you were fed bad information by lying sacks of crap. And that's unfortunately what a lot of the broadcast media is today, and a lot of the punditry is today. They're not honest. Because if they were honest, they would have told you what I've just told you. The only pass you had was a very slim one. It was not highly likely. It was an outside chance. I mean, that's like a royal flush type. You'd have to deal the royal flush. She'd have to got dealt the royal flush to pull that off. Now you could hold on to that because it's not statistically zero, but it was insanely low. The most likely outcome was Trump was going to win, and Trump was going to win big, and he was likely going to swipe the map with. He was going to likely sweep the map, or if not sweep the map, he was at least going to comfortably win. Now, so there you go. Here's my analysis and why Harris lost, and why the indicators were all there that Harris was going to lose. To anybody paying attention to them. Um, Now, I promised you that I would say the one person I thought that could have probably turned this around for the Democrats. There was somebody, I believe, willing to run and did in fact run. And I think you probably know who this is if you pay attention to politics. He tried to run in the primary against Biden, but the Democratic Party shut the whole primary process down. They did not want this guy. They were never going to support him. So this was never going to happen because this is a guy that they were never going to own. And that was RFK Jr. If RFK Jr. had been the Democratic nominee, now, I understand that the establishment Democratic Party would never have accepted him and allowed him to be the nominee because he's not controlled by the George Soros money and the establishment globalist oligarchy that runs the establishment politicians. And when I say that, understand, I'm saying that that's the establishment class. That is not just Democrats or Republicans. That is the entire class. George Soros is more on the Democratic side, but the oligarchy, when I bring that in the establishment political class, I'm talking about the establishment political class. It crosses both parties. They were never, ever going to let, the Democratic Party was never, ever going to let RFK Jr. be the nominee. But had he been the nominee, he was somebody that was removed enough from the garbage that was um, the Biden Harris just crap fest. So he would not have been bogged down by it. He also was delivering a message, a very populist message that would have sold and probably undercut a lot of Trump's appeal among the independent voters and the conservative Democrats. Um, I think had RFK been the nominee, and I know he probably would have easily won this election. But I don't think there's anything else that you could, what if, and gotten Democrats to win. Because all the tactical changes in the world through how they ran their campaign would not have changed the outcome. It might have affected the edges. It might have affected some of the margins around the edges. But the idea that any standard politician was going to step up, traditional politician or the Democrat, a part of the Democratic Party was going to step up somehow, even if they had a primary, even if they battle tested them, that they would have won this election. I think that's just wishful thinking. They would have been in no better place than I just presented you. A very slight possibility of an upset, but otherwise, most likely outcome they were going to lose and lose big. Anyway, that's it. I'm out. Have a great night.